And streaming on My Joy Online. My name is Kojo Yankson. Now tonight we're bringing you our special coverage of the presentation of the highlights of the NDC's 2016 Manifesto. Now this first glimpse into the official policy positions of the National Democratic Congress will be presented by the President himself. And of course, he is the flag bearer of the party, John Dramani Mahama. This will happen within the hour, so stay with us. We'll go live to the banquet hall where my colleague Ernest Kojomenu is on standby. But first, we're going to start off in the studio with the Deputy Head of the Joy News Political Desk, Malik Abbas Dabu. We'll be joined later by civil society representatives via Skype as we do a review of the 2012 Manifesto and share some expectations of the 2016 highlights. Now, Malik, before we go into the executive summary of the 2012 Manifesto, for you, what were the highlights 4 years ago?
Well, the major ones were basically education, power, and education, because you remember that the signature promise of the opposition at the time, the opposition candidate Nana Akufo-Addo, was free senior high school. And so one of the major highlights for the governing party at the time was education. Then, of course, of power, because we do know that right from that time, I think so from 2011 onwards to 2012, when we went into the election, there were issues with power generation and power distribution. So they had to focus on that as well. So in that manifesto, there was a promise of 5,000 megawatt power provision in the 4-year period that the president was going to be in power if he won that election. He did win. So those were the major highlights: education, and then the economy. In the economy, there was a certain projection, because remember that the economy had done very well in 2011, growing by 15% plus, the highest ever. So there was a focus on the economy as well. So the major planks were education, power, economy.
Now, you talk about the importance of power, and you can tell that throughout their campaign promises in the manifesto of 2012, there are several references to power, and a lot of their promises hinged on the presentation of stable power. For example, they talked about how they were going to revive, to create jobs by reviving several sectors. Now, if you look at their job creation plan for 2012, they talked about how they were going to regenerate the manufacturing industry. They actually pointed to several specific industries that they will be regenerating, provided they could have the power.
Absolutely.
So do you think that in many ways the difficulties with power has affected their ability to deliver on these promises?
Absolutely, because I do not think that the president and the government at the time foresaw how serious the power challenge was going to be. When the matter persisted and the power supply became more erratic, then the government had to shift focus and then look at what to do with power. So they had to go into deals to bring Ameri, to bring car power, to bring all of those other deals that were geared towards dealing with this problem, which was going to be a big problem for the party going into the next elections. So I think that there was a certain shift to pay attention to this matter and deal with it properly. Of course, efforts were being made for the job creation matters, as we know that Commander Sugar Factory happened. We know that Starch Factory was revamped. And you are talking about power. I am reliably informed that when they went to commission that factory, the power tripped, and they waited for about an hour and a half before the power was restored and the president did the commission.
There's a part of the manifesto where they actually speak directly to certain industries that they intend to revive. They talk about how cheap gas-fired energy is going to facilitate the full revival of industries like the Volta Aluminium Company, textile industries and ventures in their value chain. They talked about ceramics, brick and tile manufacturing. They talked about glass factories, steel mills. How many of these over the past 4 years have we actually seen springing up as a result of their efforts?
Because apart from the Commander Sugar Factory, which we know, and apart from the revamping of the starch, we know that the Northern Star Tomato Factory, that was actually revamped much earlier in 2010. We know that from 2012 it stopped production. Nothing has happened to it since then. So not much really has happened in terms of job creation, the revamping of factories, and the establishment of same. There have been some efforts around, and the often cited Commander Sugar Factory, which itself is at the moment not producing because there's no sugar cane. We are being told that efforts are being made to cultivate sugar cane. Farmers have been engaged, monies have been given out. The company itself is cultivating sugar cane so that they can start production in earnest. But as of now, it is not producing. So efforts have been made, but the results have not been much, because remember, sometimes when they are not in power, they make all of these promises. I think that at the time that they made the promises, they did not know that they were going to be hit by a 12% deficit after the 2012 elections. So from 2012, 2013, 2014, there was a consistent problem of deficit. And once you have a huge deficit that you have to deal with, then what is left in the kitty to engage in some of these activities by establishing factories and revamping moribund ones that existed but which have collapsed? There's no money to do so. So the intentions may be there. When it comes to practicalizing those intentions, then it became much more of a difficult task.
Malik, let's talk a little bit about health. Now, there were several promises in the manifesto of 2012, and of course we have heard in the past couple of weeks from Joyce Bawa Mokhtari, who is the spokesperson for the Mahama campaign, 2016 Mahama campaign, that this new manifesto is going to be by and large an extension or a continuation of what we were told in 2012, with some new initiatives. So let's look at health. They intended to double the number of community-based health planning and services, that's CHIPS compounds, okay, from about 1,600 to 3,200 to meet the needs of underserved communities. Now, we all heard when there was that promise of 10% of ministers' salaries being taken to do this. First of all, has that happened?
Well, we don't know, because at the time there were questions being asked about how long was this going to take place. Is it that it was just 1 month, or it was just a whole year, or how long was it going to take? We don't know. We don't know how many CHIPS compounds were built as a result of that pay cut. We do know that at this point, and I was listening to Raymond in the morning, he was talking about something in the region of 1,006 or 2,000 CHIPS compounds that have been built. There's so many more to go. But as it relates to the pay cut, we do not know how many were built. Possibly, at today's presentation, the president may give us a hint as to how many CHIPS compounds were built. We do know that regional hospitals are being built. And the Ridge Hospital is often cited. It was in existence. They are revamping it. They are expanding facilities there, increasing the number of beds. They are doing the same with Wa Hospital. They are doing the same with Tamale Teaching Hospital as well.
Let's have a look at some of the detail of what they actually said regarding what you're talking about. So they said they would establish regional hospitals in the eastern region at Kufuridia, Upper East region, Bolgatanga, and Upper West region in Wa, to complete the NDC's grand plan of providing a modern regional hospital in each of the 10 regions of Ghana. So, well, reality check?
Well, to some extent, because we do know that the Ridge Hospital is often cited, and of course it looks magnificent when you drive past that road in front of the Ghana Electoral Commission. It looks very well done. There were questions about whether there was value for money, and quite recently you heard the running mate to the MPP's flag bearer, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, raising questions about the money that was spent and drawing parallels between that hospital and a similar one at the University of Ghana, and making the claim that he believes that the money was not well spent. And you know that way before his allegations, there were claims that the contract itself had been bloated and the sum was inflated and all of that.
Now they responded to these.
Absolutely.
How satisfactory were those responses?
Well, they responded to that and said there was no basis for those allegations, and that people should pay attention to the structure and the number of beds and the burden is going to take off hospitals such as 37 Military Hospital and Kolebu Teaching Hospital, the main referral hospital in Accra, and lift the burden out of that so that people can have access to adequate health care. And if you look at the building, it looks beautiful. Tamale, I haven't seen how much work has been done in Tamale. They say it's beautiful. Not much has happened in some of the other regions. But at least we can vouch for the Ridge Hospital, we can vouch for Tamale, Bolga, and Wa. Not much work has happened.
Now, moving on from health, let's talk a little bit about youth and sports, another area that I'm particularly interested in, because there were several things promised. They would establish a 10 million Ghana City Jobs and Enterprise Development Fund. I think that is what we're now seeing as the Youth Enterprise Fund. Okay, so it was to encourage and support young people to become successful entrepreneurs and create sustainable job opportunities. Now, that in itself, the Youth Enterprise Fund that was created, that in itself came under some criticism. But in terms of ticking off a campaign promise, job done, right?
Well, I remember you and I had a discussion with this, and we're arguing with the employment minister, Haruna Iddrisu, over this matter. And our arguments were that there are already existing institutions that have the manpower and the experience to train people, to acquire skills that would enable them to set up their own companies and their own enterprises and deal with this problem of youth unemployment. Well, the government quite disagrees. The government believes that the best way to deal with this is create a certain fund and put people ahead, to head it, and then invite application. The person who has the youth authority, National Youth Authority, and who is the NDC's parliamentary candidate for Kumbungu, Rasmu Barak, told us that they had invited young people, and he claimed that some of the applications that came were very promising, and that they were going through the processes, stringent processes, to select the people who will benefit from this. Of course, there were questions being raised about how are we to ensure that these persons who are going to be selected, the selection will not be motivated by politics, and that the persons selected are people who deserve, and when they take that money, they can apply it properly, apply it judiciously, that in the end, they will not be a burden on the nation. These things tend to be political decisions. No matter how you argue against them, once the politicians believe that this is the way to go, and of course this is an election year, you can't reasonably expect that the governing party won't bring some of these vehicles with which it can use to campaign. Of course, there are people who will slip through the system because they know somebody who knows another person who is politically connected. You can't take that away from them. Of course, all of those beneficiaries will be Ghanaians, they will tell you. So there's nothing much you can do about that, really.
So, well, done but not quite done. Absolutely. This is your election headquarters on the Joy News channel. We're also live on Joy 99.7 FM. We won't be long. We'll take a quick break. And when we come back, we will look more critically into the substance of the promises made by the governing NDC in 2012. Raymond Aqua will join us. You don't want to miss that. Back. If you've just joined us, this is our special coverage of your election headquarters, coming to you on the Joy News channel. We're also live on Joy 99.7 FM. It's a special coverage of the presentation of the NDC's 2016 Manifesto highlights. My name is Kojo Yankson, and with me in the studio are Raymond Aqua and Malik Abbas Dabu. Now, we've all been looking at the promises made by the party 4 years ago, looking at how far the government has come in fulfilling them. I think it's time for us to move on to education, but first of all, you're welcome, Raymond. Always good to see you.
Thank you so much.
And Malik, just watch how Raymond spews out these facts without consulting a single piece of paper.
Absolutely.
It's his party trick, indeed. Now, let's talk about what the NDC promised regarding education in 2012. They said they would eliminate the remaining 60% of identified schools under trees and provide decent facilities for all rural schools. How would you mark them against that?
Okay, so the 60% was somewhere around 2,738. Now, as of last year, December, their own records in the Green Book and other ones indicated that they are removed 1,700. Indeed, as of July this year, the most recent data from the ministries, I can give it to them, is that they have 2,030. What's left today is some 658. Which you are yet to remove. But the president gave us an indication on when all of this will be cleared. In March this year, the president said we should give the government up to 2020 to clear all schools under tree. This is also because when they brought in the scope of schools under tree to mean that dilapidated structures, not only when there is the lack of structures, that's where the problem is. So now they have to then do an audit to expand the scope. So this less than 700 that's left to be removed may not necessarily be the bigger picture. So that's where the difficulty is. So they themselves actually brought in the scope that, one, it's not schools which were rarely under trees, as in under trees or without structures, but it's schools with dilapidated structures. When they brought it that way, then they have to increase the number from what was supposed to be the 2,700 now to more than that. That is why they can no longer say that it's less than 600 to be removed. If they kept with the original definition of same, it would have been just 600, which with very serious intent, and of course, I mean, if government says it's investing in infrastructure, it can do so and can remove some of these schools. But with barely 3 months to elections, you have to build 600 schools at the basic level. It will be a lot of work to do. So the president indicated earlier this year that let's go up to 2020.
So they set themselves.
But the question then will be, if it is left with just 600, why 2020? Because you actually have removed a huge chunk within the period you're talking about.
I suspect the redefinition has something to do with this. But in terms of the target they set themselves, which is about 2,700, they're left with only 600 to go. So that is significant progress?
Yes, it's a lot of progress, especially in the area. And of course, this is also because all of the data can best be coming from the same ministry, the Ministry of what they call it, the Ministry of Education. That's the problem. The only institution that would have been in a position to give us some alternative data would have been from the Ministry of what they call it, from the World Bank. In fact, UNESCO also does some education monitoring, but UNESCO mostly have backdated what they call it data. So 2013, it releases GEM, the Global Education Monitoring Report, just last week. The data referenced in that particular report is 2013. But we're talking about up-to-date information. Indeed, earlier today, I even spoke to the Director of Infrastructure at the Ministry, who was saying that we have improved it to this particular level, and the intent is, of course, they don't even think they can remove all, but the intent is that whilst we're still working with a figure of 1,700 or 1,800, they say they have improved it to 2,030 schools under trees removed.
Malik, before we talk about some of the other promises under education, how important was this particular one in terms of them appealing to the grassroots and ensuring that those in the hinterlands understand that their education is a priority to the government? How important was this particular promise?
It's a difficult thing to measure. You know why? Because if you go back to previous elections, 2004, 2008, under the HIPIC initiative, the Kufuor government built a lot of schools. Each of these schools was clearly marked HIPIC project, and you could tie it to the government. If you also go into rural areas, you would find that virtually every school is a polling area. Now, when you go and check the election results of 2004 and 2008, there are many areas where hitherto the place was just a shed and people were sitting there. The government came and built it, and yet the people voted for the NDC. So it's really difficult to measure and calculate how much votes that a party will get on the basis purely of how many schools you have removed, how many schools you promised to remove, how many schools you promised that you will build and replace dilapidated buildings with better infrastructure. It's difficult to gauge because that 2004 and 2008 experience tells us that even though the government at the time removed those dilapidated structures, in some cases there were no structures at all, and built modern classrooms, in the next elections, the people still voted for the party that didn't do that. They voted against the party that built the schools for them.
Another big highlight under education was the promise to establish 10 new colleges of education in the medium term to be located in areas currently not well served, and in anticipation of the increase in student numbers on account of their increased access to education program. We'll talk about the increased access to education program in a bit. But first of all, 10 new colleges of education. Raymond.
There is no evidence that a single one has been constructed. Why? What government decided to do first of all is absorb former private colleges of education. 5 of them were absorbed. So the government will say that we absorbed and improved 5, reducing the number. but we were given an inkling as to what they really intended to do. The finance minister in the 2016 media review indicated that they have plans of building 2 in the Greater Accra region and the Central region. So in reality, before this year ended, the main idea from 2012 up to this time was the 2 in mind. But before that time, they had absorbed, and of course, there's a difference between building and absorbing and converting. You know, recently there's a discussion whether you established or you constructed a university of a sort. But there's a difference between building.
You matter in mind.
Yes, of course. So they actually absorbed 5 private schools first. And the real intent is that they are going to build 2 more. It is unclear where they are going to do the building, or whether they've indeed started any project to indicate that this is where the other teacher training colleges are going to be. Of course, now they say they are colleges of education anyway.
Okay, could you just respond to contribute to this? I hosted the Deputy Communications Director of the NDC, Fred Abeno, on this matter, and I asked him specifically, did you fulfill your promise to build the 10 training colleges? And he said, well, when the party won the elections, they realized that, look, the most important thing to do was to expand access at the school so that many more students will have access to school and gain admissions rather than go and waste money and build, because the problem of teacher training was not necessarily buildings, but it was intake, because many of the schools were not taking up to the capacity that they could take. So the government rather decided to be judicious. Instead of spending money to build 10 schools, they decided that we would take out the teacher training allowance so that enable the schools to use that money to expand their facilities, admit more students. The question to that response is, at the time that the promise was being made, did the party not know? Because in 2012, you were in power. Information, basic information such as we don't need facility, we don't need to build new schools, we just need to expand access. Why didn't the government know? Why did you make a promise and later come to give an explanation?
Yes, indeed, an important question. Now, we're joined by Patrick Stevenson, who is the Research Director of the Imani Center for Policy and Education. He's had to park his car to join us in our discussion via Skype. Patrick, you're very welcome.
Good evening, Kujo. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for sacrificing your time. Now, you've just come to us as we're discussing education. Several promises made. First of all, to expand access to education, ensure 100% access of all children of school-going age, and then, of course, to establish infrastructure like colleges of education and so forth. Now, here's an interesting one: to establish a new public university in the Eastern region, to complete the NDC's vision of providing a public university campus in every region of the country, and also to expand academics. So let's get your assessment of the performance of the NDC in the area of education regarding all the various promises they made.
Well, I think we should put a couple of things in context. And so I think 2 years ago, exactly 2 years after Mahama won the elections in 2012, we did a review of the, if you like, the sort of benchmarks that they set prior to the elections for some of these social indicators. And I think education is one of the pillars that we looked at within the social services sector. And by then, we had recognized that some of the problems that are diagnosed in 2012, which informed the manifesto promises, were a bit misdiagnosed for tertiary educational institution or university in each of the districts. Was one of the issues that came up.
It appears that
somebody should go. Can you hear me?
We can just about hear you, Patrick. The signal keeps cutting off, but we're following so far. It appears we have a bit of a frozen screen there. We'll work to reconnect with Patrick Stevenson, who has so graciously agreed to join us from his vehicle. We certainly hope that we're able to get more from him before the end of the show. But we're talking about education and trying to assess how the NDC has done against the promises that they made in the 2012 Manifesto. Now, Raymond, it's great to be able to check some of these facts with you, because ensuring 100% access for all children of school-going age, which is what F Cube requires, that's something that I'm pretty sure we can measure their progress against, isn't it?
The only difficulty, however, is that whilst governments seem to have actually, in its, there's progress reports on the achievement of the MDGs. In 2014, we wrote boldly that we had exceeded 100% to 106%. Interestingly, the next year, 2015, the UNICEF reports actually indicated that there are still some 500,000 students who are of school-going age at the basic level who are not in school.
Wow.
So on one hand, we had exceeded the fact that we needed to get the kids in school. On the other hand, there are still some 500,000 students who are yet to be enrolled in school. There are several reasons why these issues actually may crop up.
But we may have to find out what
I think we have Patrick again, if you don't mind, if we can get straight back to Patrick, who was developing an important point. Patrick, I think we have you again. Please continue from where you left off, please.
That's good. So I was saying that, I mean, the whole essence of having somebody go through the tertiary educational system, ideally is to make the person employable, right? And so the conversation around having one university in every regional capital or in every region necessarily doesn't wash it. I mean, we've had situations in this country where people have had to move across regions to look at the problem of accessibility at the tertiary level based on a certain regional distribution. At the end of the day, what's of importance is the extent to which that people become employable when they come out of the educational institution. As you speak today, you have more than 32,000 students that are graduating every academic year from the tertiary educational system. And so is it the case that you just want to open up the floodgates and people become unemployable? I understand the whole conversation around access, but access is equally, based on a whole lot of factors, really. And so the fact that a political party says we are going to do that in every region, and clearly you see that they've had certain constraints in terms of resources and the sort of schools they were going to put up in the first place. So the fact that they just say it doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to be able to deliver it. And if they are delivering it, whether or not that intervention in itself can deliver the ultimate results that we're looking for. And so that's a challenge that we've had. I think we gave certain scores midway through the first term of John Mahama. And I think up until now, besides the UHAS that you have in the Volta region and some of the private colleges of education that have been roped up in the public sector, a few other interventions we've seen here, polishing and refurbishing some of the schools to make them look tertiary. I mean, that in itself doesn't really change anything concerning curricula, doesn't change anything concerning the quality of human resource that we're putting in. So it's very complicated. It's a very complicated conversation. So if you ask me to rate that to the extent that the sort of materials or results we have them
we apologize for the intermittent connection there with Patrick Stevenson of Imani. Now, we will be bringing you live updates from the banquet hall where the NDC is preparing to launch the highlights of their manifesto for 2016. The president himself, John Dramani Mahama, will be communicating those highlights to us. Stay with us. Make sure you don't miss a moment of it. But here are some live images coming to us now of the banquet hall. And the stage appears to be set for the event to begin. A few people milling around, but the graphics all in place. And very soon, we will be having the president adorning the occasion with... Very well, so it appears they're ready to go, and so are we, right here in the studio as we do an analysis of the 2012 manifesto, which we are told by the campaign communicator Joyce Bawa Mokhtari, this is bound to be a continuation of it. Now, here in the studio with us, we're very happy to have him, and we're pleased that Mr. Tete Chai is able to join us. Thank you so much for your time. And of course, you have been looking with an expert eye over some of the the issues that have been coming up, and we'll bring you into the conversation in a moment. But first, Malik, I'm quite curious about this whole concept of introducing the highlights of the manifesto, and then the manifesto itself at a later date.
I think it's a new introduction, because I'm not quite sure that in previous elections that's how they have done it. I think in previous elections what they have done has been to outdoor the manifesto and speak to the issues contained in the manifesto. This time they decided rather that, okay, we will do highlights and then do the manifesto launch. Remember that both parties, the NPP, NDC, have been playing hide and seek with their manifestos. Civil society organizations, journalists, ordinary voters have been asking, where are your manifestos? The NPP claims, well, in previous elections, they have put their manifestos out and their ideas have been cloned and bastardized, and therefore they don't want to put their manifesto out. The NDC says, well, our manifesto is ready. It is within our own strategy to keep it as it is and then release it at the appropriate time, and we determine when to do that. The General Secretary of the party told us that, look, we are delivering on a 2012 manifesto. If people want to assess us, they should look at what we did with our 2012 manifesto. As for the 2016 one, we will bring it at the appropriate time. Then they fixed the date, September 17th. We were all expecting that it was going to happen. And then we were told there will be highlights. I think that Joyce Bawa Muktari, who speaks for the president's campaign, said that on your show, on the Super Morning Show on Joy FM, that we would put out the highlights and then at a later date we will launch the document. I think it's a novelty that they have introduced. You can't quarrel with that.
And I suppose it will help in understanding and comprehension and digestion of large amounts of information.
It is actually particularly important to do this at this time, because only last week the NPP's vice presidential candidate dug at the government and made all manner of insinuations about incompetence and government's failure to implement some of the things that they promised they were going to do, and how the economy was going wrong, and any attempt to give the president another term is one leap towards the precipice. So it's important for the president to respond, and of course he has to respond in a formal setting, and I think that this is the best formal setting for him to respond.
Now, it's good of you all to join us on this special program. It's your election headquarters right here on the Joy News channel. We're also live on Joy 99.7 FM. And you can follow this discussion by just typing the hashtag ElectionHQ on all social media platforms. And then you can join the family. Now, if you're listening to us from Ablekuma, or watching us in Ablekuma Central constituency, then your MP is here in the person of Mr. Theophilus Tete Chai, Honourable Member of Parliament for Ablekuma Central. Good evening, and I bet you're excited.
Yeah, I have to. I have to. You know, for some time now, it has been a media war of various political parties fighting each other in terms of who is bringing his or her manifesto first and so on, who is taking whose manifesto and so on and so forth. But as a political party in government, it wasn't a problem to us, because as at the time we did our launching, we've already finished with the entire manifesto. What was left was the printing of the document. So you quite remember the General Secretary did indicate on the launching day that the following, the next 2 weeks, we were going to launch our manifesto. But, you know, His Excellency the President is playing a dual role. He's the man in charge of governance. At the same time, he's a flag bearer for the party. And so, therefore, these two dual roles needs to be managed effectively. So he does his normal state functions, going outside, doing the things that he needs to do for the good people of this country. Aside that, also look at the campaigns that he has to execute. So as a campaign team, of which I'm a member, we decided that, look, let's look at the shadow of His Excellency the President, and then let's look at a shadow that will fit the launching of this manifesto, and that is the appropriate time. for us.
So instead of one event to launch the manifesto, bearing in mind his busy schedule, you decided on 2 events.
You know, the NDC is very dynamic. Very, very dynamic. And continuously, the people of this country see us as a party that is always reforming itself. Okay, we are not static. We move with the times. Okay, now, this manifesto is in 2 phases. The first phase is for His Excellency the President to address the diplomatic corps, civil society groups, religious bodies, you know, the various youth groups within the country, people that are actually going to sit down to assess this manifesto, the way it is going to be presented, okay, so that they also start making their informed choices, especially the media. You have a critical role to play. So this very occasion is for you, so that you have copies of it, and then you also start looking at it, bringing out the positives where you think there are challenges and so on and so forth. Now, on the 17th, which is coming this Saturday, that is where we do the official launch. And that one, you know, we have to make our party people also happy. And that is the dynamism in the NDC. Whatever we do, we don't forget our grassroots. Okay? Because how many people will have access to the banquet hall? Do you get it? Those who are in the banquet hall have been invited using an invitation. So therefore, it means that the masses who wants to have access to that cherished document will not have the opportunity. So we need to create an opportunity for them to also feel part of the development of the country.
Okay, we'll talk about that cherished document shortly, but I'm told that the Vice President is currently arriving at the banquet hall. We can see images of that. There he is. The Vice President, Kujo Emisa Arthur, walks into the hall, resplendent in cream African wear, as he shakes hands with all of those seated in the front row. He's currently shaking hands with Hannah Tete, and then he goes on to shake hands with a few other dignitaries who are there. They're shaking his hand, Neokran, and of course he makes his way back to his own seat, which will be right there in front of the room, and we are expecting the President to join them very soon, and we'll go over live as soon as that happens. But I want to give you the opportunity to respond, Mr. Tetechai, to some of the issues that we have already identified from your 2012 manifesto, another cherished document, I'm sure. Several things you said and promised, which, well, we are wondering how you've performed against them. For example, the CHIPS compounds that you promised. Now, you've delivered CHIPS compounds, but one specific thing you said you would do as a party was that you would take salaries, 10% of the salaries of ministers to fund this. Now, I want to know, did that happen?
It's still ongoing.
So it is happening?
It is the President and his ministers cut their salaries to put those things into infrastructural development, and it's still ongoing.
So if we take a minister's pay slip today, we see a 10% deduction for CHIPS compounds.
They are still contributing, and that is a very laudable thing that His Excellency the President and his ministers have done.
There are other things you promised. And,
but I was just going. It would be interesting to find out how many CHIPS compounds have been built since this policy was announced, because I remember that the President himself announced this policy. At this point, for purposes of transparency and accountability and all of that, it would be proper and it would help everyone if we were given the figures. This is how much money has been raised within this time, and these are the number of this is the number of CHIPS compounds that were built with this money, so that all of us can appreciate what the President and his ministers did when they took that pay cut.
Now, another thing you promised was to revamp certain industries. You talked about Valco. You talked about revamping the textiles industry, the steel mills. What's happening with those?
We've done a lot. We've done a lot. I believe that not all have had that level of investment that they need.
What level of investment have they had?
We've gone through a lot of challenges. In fact, the power situation, we all know exactly what went into it. And as a result, as a country, even the revenues that we were supposed to generate fell short. Okay, but that notwithstanding, if you look at the tomato factory, if you look at
sorry, for the purpose of our radio listeners, when you say the tomato factory and you spread your hands, what do you mean?
The Palugu tomato factory. If you look at what do you call it? They recently built one at what do you call it? Commander, the sugar factory. These are all structures that
Palugu, for example, how productive is Palugu?
Well, currently they are still producing. They are still producing. And
are they?
Yeah,
because as far as I know, the Northern Star Tomato Factory started production in 2010. And then 2011, 2012. The last production was actually in 2012. Since 2012, they haven't produced 1 ton of tomato puree.
The factory itself.
Palugu was actually rechristened Northern Star. And when it was revamped, I remember that Hannah Tete, who was trade minister at the time, was the one who went and they commissioned it. And they started production in 2010. So by 2012, they had produced 400 drums of tomato puree. All of those 400 drums of tomato puree was left there to rot. Since 2012, there hasn't been any production at all, unless there is any concrete evidence to counter what I am saying. If you go and find out now, the Northern Star Tomato Factory is not producing.
There are pictures in the media. There are pictures in the media. It looks like a ghost town. There's rotting tomatoes all over there.
2012.
Well, yes, since 2012 to this date, there has been no announcement of continuous production. So which continuing production do you refer to?
Well, I don't know the pictures that you are trying to show, but if the pictures are there, let us all look at the pictures. But these are factories that have been, if you look at the Ayensu starch factory, the cassava, currently they are still producing.
To finalize,
you know, those factories.
To finalize on Palugu, do you say it's still producing?
Well, that is, as far as I know, those factories are still in production.
Let's talk about the textile industry, another area that you said you would fully revive using cheap gas-fired energy. What we do have most of the time is expensive crude oil energy. Textile industries and ventures in their value chain. How have you done?
Yeah, currently, you all know the gas pipeline project that is being done to extend gas to the western, that's the eastern part of the country, around the Tema enclave. And these are to serve industries within that catchment area. Currently, the project is on course. And I believe that when this project is completed, then some of those factories will then have the opportunity to also access cheap energy to perform.
This is a promise you made in 2012. Where in 2016, 3 months away from the next election, and you're telling us about a project that is now being established.
Well,
how is that a fulfillment of a promise?
Yeah, and I believe that that is why, as a nation today, various stakeholders are trying to put the various political parties in terms of their manifestos to test, because we want to ensure that these manifestos that are brought to the fore at least meet the SMART objectives. Is that not it?
Yes. Does yours?
You see, I've always said that, look, as a democracy, we are not static in the way we do things, okay? If certain things are done wrongly in the past, it doesn't mean that the same things should be done in the current season.
So this is for us, acceptance of the fact that you have not fulfilled these campaign promises.
His Excellency the President has admitted that yes, he's made certain promises that have not been wholly satisfied. And he has adduced reasons why those things have not been done. Okay? That alone is a mark of quality leadership. That you promise and you realize that you are not able to achieve the entire target that you set to yourself. You should be honest enough to admit to your people that yes, I said I'll do this, but as of today, this is how much or how many have been able to do. What are the reasons for the shortfall? The reasons are adduced.
Does that not make your campaign message a little bit difficult? If you're saying, well, I promised
that is why
I failed, so give me some,
not fail.
Give me, so reward me with another term.
No. If you say fail, it means you promised and you never delivered.
But in this case, you're putting the blame on some other things.
Of course, in economics, figures are not static. Okay?
The economy, all things are never equal.
The economy changes day by day. Is that not it?
Did you not know this in 2012 when you made these promises?
Well, maybe at the time you are making those promises, let's say the economy is moving up. More resources are coming in. You use that as your projections. Okay? Now, when there is an economy turn down, what do? And whose fault you need to adjust.
Who was in charge of the economy when it turned down?
Let's look at the schools, the senior high schools. His Excellency, the President promised 200 of those schools. Is that okay? Now, what our resources as a country can meet is 123. And that is what currently we stuck to, ensuring that those ones are completed. He could have initiated all the 200 so that some of them will be even at the, how do you call it, the floor stage. Okay, at least those things are coming up. But he said no, let's complete 123 so that we make judicious use of the resources we have now.
And how many have you completed?
How many? Several of them. Commissioning are ongoing.
I think so far 10.
No, officially. Officially.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying so far 10 have
officially, he has commissioned 10. But he's instructed
3 months from the election, with a promise of 200, you've completed 10.
Listen, if you have school, the sort of structures that we are putting up, some are 85%, 90%, and so on and so forth. Within 3 months, a lot of them can be completed. That is why the president has instructed...
How many will be completed in 3 months?
In 3 months, wait and see. Because the president has already instructed the minister that henceforth, any of the schools that are ready, let the children have it to the school.
Mr. Tetecha, let me ask you this. In light of your experience from 2012, with a litany of promises, which unfortunately, due to all the reasons you are able to adduce, you didn't fulfill, are you going to be more measured in 2016 when you make promises to Ghanaians?
That is exactly what we are going to do. Wait and listen to the president.
Measured promises?
Yes, that is what we intend doing.
Okay, because what's going to be the main focus in 2016 of your manifesto? Let's not preempt what the president will say.
I won't even do it.
But what has been the big priority?
You see, this is a government in power, okay? We seek to, once again, solicit the mandate of the people to continue with what we are doing, okay? So, first of all, most of the things that are going to be inculcated in the manifesto are ongoing things that have not yet been completed. If you take, let's say, the 200 secondary schools, we are still yet with some number to be built.
So you'll recycle that?
Yeah, it has to. Because that 200 needs to be fulfilled, okay? Because we've done that looking at the population in terms of children getting access to secondary school. And we think by putting up the 200, we would have satisfied that level of access. So it's something that is continuing. Let me give you an example. When we came office in 2009, the NPP had then started the National Health Insurance Scheme, school feeding program. These are all at the how do you call it, initial stages, okay? But what did we do? We continued. We improved upon them. Do you get it? So, making promises is not something that one makes a promise and then at the end of, let's say, his tenure of office, somebody comes and says, "Oh, I didn't make this promise. You started this thing. So, let me take resources that were to be used in that particular area to focus on my agenda." We could have done that. But you see,
it's the same leader. So.
But we believe in the principle of our constitution, continuity, which is very important. So once you have a manifesto or a promise to the people, what your predecessor left, you still need to continue, because by doing so, you save resources for the country.
So, sorry, who's the predecessor here? President Mahama is running for office one more time. So who's the predecessor here in this example that you're giving?
President Kufuor was there before we came. Atamils also came.
You didn't continue President Kufuor's manifesto. Your manifesto in 2008 was not the NPP manifesto of 2004, was it?
We told the people of this country that when power is given to us, we will continue with the good policies of the NPP. We said it. It was black and white.
So you promised people some things in 2012, many of which you didn't accomplish.
Many of them we've even accomplished to the satisfaction of the people.
Okay.
You can't achieve all. But so this time we need to be very meticulous.
So your next manifesto is going to reproduce all the ones you didn't fulfill. Actually, we can go straight to the banquet hall now, and we have pictures of President Mahama arriving with his wife Lordina, the First Lady, Mrs. Mahama. They're shaking hands with the Vice President, taking their seats for the event to begin, and I believe we're going to go live to the banquet hall in just a few moments, but not just yet, for the moment they're singing the national anthem. Let's observe that, and then we'll continue our conversation. So we'll be joining them shortly for the full program as the President presents the highlights of the 2016 manifesto of the National Democratic Congress, the NDC. But we have here with us...
There was a couple of things that Mr. Tatachais raised that I wanted to respond to about, and you know better than me, you spoke to somebody who was saying, well, we've made promises, if we fulfill even half of that, we have done a lot. I think that the risk the politicians run is having a distrusting electorate. Because if you make promises and consistently you don't deliver the promises, you don't deliver on those promises, what will happen is that the electorate are not going to believe you the next time that you say you're going to do something. And we are actually seeing symptoms of that, because you would hear voters say, Obia Basa, everybody is the same. When they come, it's their own parochial narrow interest that they pursue as against the interest of the public. No matter how much they shout that when they come, it is the interest of the public that they seek. The public don't quite see that, because they see you make promises to them and you are not keeping those promises. When you are held accountable by journalists, those journalists are actually attacked, and sometimes you give explanations as to why you are unable to fulfill the promises that you made. And you even have a curious situation where somebody who is not even in power and makes promises now says, well, but even if we come to power and we are able to fulfill a part of it, we would have solved the problem. That is not quite a problem. At the time that you are making the promise, and in 2012, your party was in power, you had access to the national kitty. You were in position to determine how much you had. Of course, we do know that you refer to slump in prices of cocoa and gold and other products, but you still could have had a better appreciation of how much money was available to you to execute the kinds of agenda that you set for yourself and to fulfill the promises that you said you were going to fulfill. If you are unable to fulfill those promises, coming back to tell us that, well, it was because of slumping gold prices on the international market, cocoa prices went down by a certain margin, and because of that you were unable to fulfill that. You promised 200 schools, you initiated 123, you've commissioned just about 10. Of course, you say the rest are at various stages of completion. We don't know. At this point, if part of the 123 are even at foundation level, we are unable to tell. So I think that you, the politicians, must be measured, and I hope that your prediction will come right, that in today's event we will find out that in the NDC's 2016 manifesto, the promises are going to be more measured, because you have had a sober reflection over the national kitty, and you want to be, you don't want to make promises that you can't keep.
Mr. Tetacha is the Member of Parliament for Ablekuma Central. And, you know, in your, when you were speaking earlier, you explained that most of the time the reason why a campaign promise is not fulfilled is perhaps because of the economy and the direction that the economy took, which you couldn't have predicted in 2012. Well, the fact is you did predict how the economy will go in 2012. You made some promises under the economy. You talked about
how we expect it to grow.
The average GDP growth rate would be at least 8% per annum. You talked about single-digit inflation. You talked about an overall budget deficit equivalent to about 5% of GDP, gross international reserves, to cover not less than 4 months of imports. And ultimately, you were looking at a per capita income of at least $2,300 by 2017. These are the predictions you made for our economy. What's the reason for not meeting these ones?
We've not been able to meet the targets. But you know, we are definitely very close to most of the targets that we set for ourselves. Currently, we know the, how do you call it, in terms of our GDP growth rate, we currently know where it is. We expect it to be around 4%.
It's not where you said it would be.
Exactly. And you see, when it comes to economics, it is very difficult, very, very difficult to predict.
But you still did.
No, you need to set targets so that you work towards those targets. Setting targets is very, very important. Because if you don't
your manifesto is,
if you don't set a target for yourself, how do you work to achieve it?
So to be clear, is that what you are communicating to the voter? That your manifesto is basically a bunch of targets that you will try and achieve?
There are some targets that we've even exceeded. Okay? There are some targets that we've even exceeded.
I just want to understand what you want the voter to go into the ballot box.
You see, when we talk of economics, look, when it comes to the issues of, let's say, things that you can easily measure, like, let's say, the schools, okay? You can hold the president accountable for it. Is that okay? But when it comes to economics, these are projections. They are projections.
Except that those projections, for me, the voter, I don't really care.
Exactly.
I'm giving you empowerment. I'm giving you resources.
You don't care.
I expect that you should be
these
able
are
to
things
make predictions
that are not
based
static.
on science.
These are things that are not static. Okay.
As the conversation heats up here in the studio, you can join us too using the handle Joy News on TV, Joy 99.7 FM, and also on Facebook, which is also on Joy News on TV, where you have been sharing your views so far. We'll be bringing you some of your thoughts and views on the 2012 manifesto and expectations for 2016. Shall we read a few and then come to Malik's point? So on Facebook, on our Joy News page, Eric Amponsa says he promised to build 10 colleges of education and 200 SHSs, but not a single college of education has been built, and only 10 out of the 200 promised has been commissioned. This is total failure on the part of the NDC and John Mahama. That's Eric Amponsa's view. Stephen Saved Bafo Amiao says, I believe President Mahama has done well, owing to the fact that he works to solve the problem and not minimize it like others have done. Ismail Avo, let's read this one from Daniel Kombok Jr. and it says, I recall the 200 community day schools, and of which he has done well. About 123 are at various levels of construction. JDM is really working for us. Okay, let's read one more. This one, I believe, is from Alu Mahama. And it says, he said he was going to reduce fuel prices drastically, give incentives and motivate teachers to put up their best to deliver quality education. Okay then, let's come back into the studio where, oh, actually, hang on a moment. Let's see, we have a couple more. This one says, I believe this one is from Richard Tete. It says, 1, to bring an end to infrequent power supply by 2013. 2, increase power supply from 2,440 to 5,000 megawatts. 3, making the Tema oil refinery technically efficient. 4, establish 200 senior high schools. 5, ensure 100% universal access to basic schools. 6, increase teacher training colleges by 30%. 7, upgrade polytechnics to technical universities, which we've seen some work on. 8, establish 10 new colleges of education. 9, establish a public university in the eastern region. And 10, progressively free basic education.
Senior high school education.
Okay, so let me ask you this. I mean, what exactly do you... this is what Richard remembers, by the way, from the 2012 manifesto. Now, Malik, what exactly is your reaction at this point to what Mr. Tetechai is saying?
Before then, there was somebody who sent a comment and said he promised to reduce fuel drastically. That's not correct. It was Mills's government. It was in the 2008 manifesto that promise was made. President Mahama didn't quite make a promise to reduce fuel drastically. But you are talking about the indicators that they set themselves in the 2012 manifesto to single-digit inflation. Where does inflation stand today? Inflation is 16.7, down from 18.4 last month, so it's down to 16.7, far off from single digit. Growth, consistent growth, 8%. Let's see how they've done from, and these are figures from they themselves, from 2012 till date. 2012, the growth was 8.8, and then 2013, 7.6. 2014, the growth GDP was 6.9. 2015, it came down to 3.9. And then first quarter, second quarter this year is picked up to 4.9. It's projected to do a little less than this by the end of the year.
You would almost be forgiven, Mr. Tetechai, for thinking that we were working against the target, looking at the trend. You know, and it's similar for many of the other economic indicators. Really, if the thing is not in our control, why do we make promises about it?
Yeah, you see, I've already said that these are projections, okay? In doing projections, you might not be able to achieve your target. But the question is, consistently as a nation, are we experiencing some level of growth? It is very, very important. As we talk to you now, some countries are going through recession, okay? And you see, we live in the global village. And that is why, as I've told you, our manifesto for this year, we are very mindful of some of these challenges. That is why we are not going to make promises that will put us into the same situation we had before. Because look, our democracy is growing. And we also need to learn from best practices, okay? So now that you've seen how the economy is growing, we will take a cue from that. And you will see what we are going to put out as a political party.
Honorable is quite not taking the advice, the free advice I gave him. If you make promises and say these are projections, they are not projections. If you put in your manifesto, that manifesto should be treated like the Bible. If you put in this manifesto that this is what you will do, you are going into a pact with the Ghanaian people. You are selling something to them, and then when they have bought it, then you come back and say, oh, these were just projections, and there are extenuating circumstances that make it difficult for us to fulfill these promises that we make to you. The people who voted for you on the basis of your promise, can they take back that vote until the next elections? They can't. what then is happening is you appear to be duping the people when you make a promise to them that you can't keep. And your response is, well, but when it comes to the economy, these projections, these promises tend to be projections. I think that your own integrity as politicians will be called into question when you make promises to the people, and at the end of the 4-year term, you are giving them explanation as to why you were unable to fulfill the promises that you made.
But you see, you cannot also put out things in a vacuum. You can't do that, okay? If the government says, I will build schools, I will build schools, because you don't want to indicate a figure that you will not be able to achieve. Maybe at the point of doing your projection, you know that target can be achieved. Is that okay? And then you decided not to. Then it becomes vague. On what basis are the people going to assess you, the candidate? All what I'm saying is that our promise should be something that can be measured, something that can be attainable. Do you get it?
I think I generally agree with that.
If you don't mind, let's very quickly go across to the banquet hall where the event is about to begin, the launch of the highlights of the 2016 Manifesto. At the moment, the Vice President is taking the podium to introduce the President, who will then deliver the 2016 Manifesto. Shall we go across and listen to the Vice President?
Regional Chairman, members of the National Executive Committee of our party, Ministers of State, members of the diplomatic community, I welcome you to this evening's event. This manifesto in the series of manifestos that the National Democratic Congress has produced for an election. It is based on our social democratic beliefs, the principal aim of which is to develop Ghana's human resource potential. The NDC has been privileged to implement 4 of these manifestos, and we have incorporated into these and implemented them in 4 administrations of the NDC. After each successive manifesto, we have assessed the previous one, determined the weaknesses in them, the new challenges that our nation faces, and how these can be overcome. Our belief is that our successes are never enough, and we can always improve upon it. Therefore, we strive to do better every time. On 15 December last year, we launched our progress report, Accounting to the People. Since then, our opponents have tried to dismiss the reality that we depict in the Account to the People document, seeking to belittle our achievements and claiming, among others, that as a government we have benefited from more resources than any other government in the history of our country. And they have used this, they have used nominal figures to show this. They have also tried to show that the fiscal developments we see are not the result of the plans that we have implemented. They've also said that the projects have cost more than they should. In a sense, this denial today, this denial that our opponents try to make, is similar to the political tricks that they have engaged in and employed since 1992. Political tricks that seek to deny the progress we have made as a nation under the administration of successive National Democratic Congress government. I can appreciate the dilemma of the opposition, because it's much easier to deny that anything has happened than to say that there has been progress, but that they can do better. Our manifesto this year is titled changing lives, transforming Ghana. Change is a word we refuse to concede to the opposition. Because we consider ourselves to be the real agents of change in our country, as you'll see from the presentation that Mr. President is going to make in the next few minutes. So it is my great pleasure to introduce the President of our Republic, John Dramani Mahama, the agent for change and transformation in our country. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. My very able Vice President and running mate, let me thank you for the warm collaboration and friendship we continue to enjoy, and to thank you for your able assistance in what we've been able to achieve and what we intend to do in the second term of our presidency, inshallah. My difficulty in presenting this manifesto has mainly been in how to give a snapshot of it, because it's more than 100 pages long. And so deciding what would be of interest and what to highlight has been my major problem. And so I had to draw on the reserves of my lessons in English language summarizing in school to be able to reach what I'm going to present to you today. And so what I'll do is I'll just read the foreword, and then the rest of them I'll just skip and touch on the main issues as I deem fit. After Saturday, Sunyani, the whole manifesto will be available for people who want to go into the details and nitty-gritty. It's been done in a very simple style. It has a brief introduction, and then we have it in 4 thematic areas. And for every sector, it introduces briefly, and then it talks about our achievements, and then it talks about what our commitments for the next 4 years is going to be. So I'll start with the foreword. As my first term as President of the Republic of Ghana comes to an end, I've come to appreciate even more the potential of Ghana to provide prosperity and security for all its citizens. The journey so far has been worth the effort. We've been confronted with challenges, but have achieved major success. With the blessings of the Almighty God and the support of the people of Ghana, I'm confident that my second and final term in office would move Ghana even closer towards the era of prosperity and security. I'll continue to work together with the people of Ghana to create opportunities that will generate prosperity for all. This is what the agenda for transformation suggests. This transformation entails a move away from over-reliance on commodity exports towards diversification and value addition. All of these have begun already, and they will be sustained and accelerated over the next 4 years. An integral part of the NDC's agenda for transformation is our unwavering belief that Ghana's greatest wealth is its people. Our country will continue to rise as we focus a large part of our developmental efforts in harnessing the skills, potentials, and ingenuity of our people. There's tremendous potential in the Ghanaian to create, innovate, and transform our nation. As leader of the NDC and government, our policies, programs, and projects have been directed at putting people first, building a strong economy for jobs, expanding infrastructure for accelerated development, and advancing transparent and accountable governance. We've been vindicated as we have seen huge payoffs in terms of access to education, access to healthcare, and other social services. This has led to improved educational outcomes and favorable health indices for our people. We've undertaken in some instances completed major institutional reforms and built strong and viable institutions. We've invested in building robust infrastructure to stimulate economic growth. This has created jobs, and we intend to create even more jobs. Addressing unemployment and creating job opportunities will be at the core of my renewed mandate. With the renewed mandate I'm seeking, we will continue policies and programs and introduce new initiatives that are consistent with our key social democratic principles of equity in development. We still have more roads to construct. We have more houses to build. We have more food to produce. We have additional educational and health facilities to provide, and we have more jobs to create. Indeed, these are also key demands of the Global Compact encapsulated in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which we have agreed to uphold. With the collaboration of the Bank of Ghana, we shall institute mechanisms that will significantly lower the cost of credit and position the private sector to play its role in the transformation agenda. Already and systematically, we are changing lives and we're transforming Ghana. Indeed, I feel very inspired by the success we have achieved in the last 4 years. We can be proud of that record. We will sustain the transformation and we will make even more progress. I have abiding faith in the people of Ghana and in the future of our country. And more importantly, I remain committed to the cause of making our nation greater and stronger. God bless our homeland, Ghana. So that is the forward. The manifesto is structured in 4 thematic areas. The first is putting people first, and that covers social services and human resources. And so you have education, healthcare, you have youth, you have social protection, and all those under putting people first. Then the second is a strong and resilient economy for job creation. And this involves strategies for macroeconomic stability and growing the economy and providing jobs. The third is expanding our social and economic infrastructure. And so under this, you have the energy sector, you have transportation, you have water resources, you have housing, and all the other infrastructural ministries. And then the final is transparent and accountable governance. This has the security services, it has foreign affairs, it has the judiciary, it has parliament, and it has all the other issues to do with governance. This document, our manifesto, provides a record of our delivery and our commitment to the people of Ghana for a second term for President John Dramani Mahama. And so I start with education. Under education, the number of educational institutions at all levels, that is putting people first, of basic education increased from 45,447 in 2008-2009 academic year to over 57,270 in the 2014-2015 academic year. And so this represents an increase of 26% in the number of educational institutions at the basic level, that is primary and junior high school. School enrollment increased from just above 7 million in 2008-2009 academic year to almost 9 million in 2014-2015 academic year, representing an increase of more than 26%. It means 26% increase in enrollment. It means that more children are going to school than before. A total of 1,614 out of 2,578 basic school projects were completed under the removal of schools under trees program. And the process to eliminate the school shift system was largely successful. And so in most parts of Greater Accra, children no longer go on the shift system, where some children go in the morning and others go in the afternoon. 100 million free exercise books were distributed, because one of the things we realized is when the teacher was teaching, some students didn't even have an exercise book in which to write what the teacher was teaching, and so it was decided to give the children exercise books for free. 12,500,000 English, mathematics, and science textbooks were distributed, because in many schools, only the teacher had a textbook. All the children had no textbooks. The number of school pupils benefiting from the school feeding program increased from 440,000 in 2008 to 1.7 million in 2014. Under the Complementary Basic Education Program, 125,000 out of school pupils have been enrolled. This is a very important thing. We have achieved almost 97% school enrollment in primary school. So the question you ask, where are the other 3%? And so the Ministry of Education set out to look for them. These are shepherd boys and others, who are not immediately able to capture into school. And so we came out with a Complementary Basic Education Program to fix school at a time that is convenient for them and bring them into school and educate them. So that even though we have 97% school enrollment, the remaining 3% are being captured under the Complementary Basic Education Program. A gender parity ratio of 1:1 has been attained at the primary level. It means for every boy going to school, there's a girl going to school. With second cycle, we commenced construction of the 123 out of the planned 200 community senior high schools. And you've been seeing me going around and commissioning them as they get ready. We implemented a progressively free senior high school program in line with Article 25 of the 1992 Constitution. We initiated a secondary education improvement program, under which 125 existing senior high schools are undergoing facility upgrades. We're building new dormitories, dining halls, administration blocks, and other things in the existing senior high schools so that they can expand the number of children they are taking. So while building new senior high schools, we also are expanding the capacity of the existing high schools so that more children after GHS can get access. The central plank of our education policy is technical and vocational education training. And so in the next 4 years, there's going to be a strong emphasis on TVET. We already have a strong emphasis on it. We've invested a lot of money in it. Currently, we are investing more than $100 million in upgrading technical schools at the secondary and tertiary level. And so TVET is going to attract strong attention from government going into the next 4 years. Because if you want to put money into the pockets of people, you need to give them the skills with which they can find the jobs to be able to earn an income. If they don't have the skills, you cannot put the money into their pocket, go around and put money in pockets. You have to empower them to be able to earn the money. We established a national apprenticeship program in which we improve skills. At the tertiary level, there was an increase in the capacity of tertiary institutions across the country, leading to an increase of 7.1% in enrollment in universities, 3.4% in polytechnics, and enrollment went up by 63.8% in the 38 public colleges of education. I will come back to that later and tell you why enrollment went up by 63.8% in the colleges of education. We commenced the construction of a new medical school, University of Ghana Teaching Hospital. We established the University of Energy and Natural Resources. We also established the University of Health and Allied Sciences. Parliament has passed the bill for the University of Environment and Sustainable Development. This is the Eastern Region University, which is going to be based in Somanya with campuses in various parts of the Eastern region. One of the campuses will be in the Afram Plains. It will be a campus focusing on agriculture. We absorbed 5 private colleges of education into the government colleges of education in the Northern Ashanti, Western, and Brong-Ahafo regions. And we granted a presidential charter to the Central University College. We reviewed the operations of the Student Loans Trust Fund. We passed the Colleges of Education Act. We abolished the quota system in the colleges of education, allowing for all 38 public colleges of education to admit at their full capacity. There was a quota system that did not allow them to admit at their full capacity because of the teacher training allowances. Once that was taken out, the quota system was abolished. And so students who had tried to enter the colleges of education and had not been able to, because of the increased capacity, many of them have been able to enter, and we have substituted the teacher training allowances with the student loan scheme. The Ministry of Education worked with the Teachers Union to reduce teacher absenteeism from 27% in 2012 to 9.3% in 2015. This had been one major headache for us, teacher absenteeism. You go to many classes, and even though teachers have been assigned, they don't go to class. But working with the teachers' unions, supervision is much better, and so more teachers are going to school and not being absent. In basic education, our commitment will be to establish colleges of education for the sole purpose of training teachers in early childhood care and development. What we've done is we've added the 2 years of kindergarten to our school system. Unfortunately, while we're training teachers for primary and junior high school and senior high school, we're not training teachers for the early childhood learning. And so normally it's done by daycare attendants. And normally if you give the child a good start at the kindergarten, then they're able to maintain it throughout their education. And so we're going to set up colleges of education that will train teachers who are specialized in training children at the early level from 4 years and upwards. We will, in the primary and junior level, we'll complete the process of eliminating the remaining schools under trees. We'll continue, I hope, the target is by 2021 to have eliminated all schools under trees. That is our target. We'll continue the provision of free school uniforms and free exercise books and free school sandals to students. We'll expand the school feeding program to cover all public basic schools in rural and peri-urban communities. We are reviewing the capitation grants and increasing it by 100% in order to support the free compulsory universal basic education. And we're going to pilot the use of electronic textbooks at the secondary level, junior high school and secondary level. And so students will receive tablets that have all their core textbooks on the tablet. And if this pilot is successful, then we shall expand it across the whole school system. We will complete the construction by 2021, when I leave office, inshallah. We'll complete the construction of all the 200 community-day senior high schools I promised. We shall expand the progressively free SHS program to cover boarding students with the emphasis on needy students and students in deprived districts. This year alone, we're adding 120,000 students in boarding school to the free senior high school program. We'll continue to provide facilities for students with learning disability to pursue their educational programs successfully. We'll implement the second phase of the Skills Development Fund to provide grants to over 120 private sector enterprises. This is under technical and vocational education. We will increase the capacity for technical training. 30% of the new community day senior high schools that we are building will be fitted with technical workshops and facilities to offer technical and vocational programs. So it means that out of the 200 new senior high schools we are building, 30% of them will be technical schools, so that we can expand the capacity for more technical education. In the next term in office, we will appoint a deputy minister with primary responsibility for technical and vocational education and training. So that we can increase supervision and make sure that we get the responses that we want. We will align vocational training properly under the Ministry of Education. Currently, vocational training is scattered. You have it under social welfare, under Ministry of Labor, under education. We'll align them properly so that the supervision can be much better. We will ensure that the new technical universities maintain their core mandates of science, technology, and vocational training. So the overwhelming percentage of graduates of the polytechnics that are being converted into technical universities must be in science, technical, and vocational courses. We will rebrand and strengthen technical and vocational education. Up to now, people believe that technical and vocational education is for dropouts. But if you look at the demands of the job market, the demand now is more for graduates of technical and vocational schools than for universities that offer mostly humanities courses. And so we need to rebrand technical and vocational education so that people don't see it as a course that you take because you dropped out of school. The oil and gas industry is looking for skilled middle-level technicians and others, but we don't have enough of them. And so we need to rebrand technical and vocational education so that people do not continue to look down on it as beneath them. We are going to establish a new college of education which would be specialized in training instructors for technical and vocational education. One of the weaknesses we find in the technical schools is we do not have enough instructors to teach the children the technical skills. And so there's going to be a college of education that is going to be set up, and it's going to be set up in Aguna Swedru in the central region. And it will specialize in training technical instructors to teach in the technical schools and technical and vocational institutions. And so the rest will complete the University of Environment and Sustainable Development. We'll complete the establishment of 3 additional colleges of education in underserved regions of Greater Accra, Central and Northern regions. We'll complete the conversion of 10 polytechnics into technical universities, and we'll provide additional facilities to augment the operations of the new medical schools in the University of Cape Coast, University for Development Studies, and University of Health and Allied Sciences. These are 3 new universities that are training doctors and other medical staff. And so we'll give them the facilities to expand the training. Teacher First agenda. We will provide accommodation for teachers who accept postings to deprived rural schools. We'll continue to issue financial clearance to employ more graduate teachers. We shall place emphasis on science and maths education. If you look at the results of the BEC and WASI, and you look at qualifications from A1 to C6, you find that the results are abysmal because most of the students fail in English, mathematics, and science. And that is why it draws back the general performance of students. And so we're going to place emphasis on maths, science, and English education and employ more teachers in these areas and give them the incentives to be able to teach our children. We establish a link between education and industry. Right now, education and industry are working at cross purposes. We're just training as many graduates as possible in different courses without looking at what industry is looking for. Education and industry must match, and there must be strong guidance counseling to guide the students into the courses that offer them better job prospects when they come out of school. Currently, we leave the children to just choose anything they want to do, and they go and do courses and come out, and they are not employable because of the courses they have done. And so we must channel the students into places where their job market prospects are much better. We will continue to promote collaborative programs between industry and educational institutions, and will provide incentives to industries and businesses that provide more room for students to do internship. Under healthcare, we have achieved a lot. Expansion of Tamale Teaching Hospital, but even if you look at the indices, we're making progress. Maternal mortality rates are on a downward trend. Infant mortality is down. Child mortality is down. Under 5 mortality is down. It means that in all these major indices, we are reducing maternal mortality and all the other mortalities. We established the National Ambulance Service. We increased the number of licensed midwives between 2009 and 2015 from 500 to 2,000 within this period. Tamale Hospital expanded 400 bed. University of Ghana Teaching Hospital 617 bed under construction. Refurbishment of intensive care units. Completion of a new eye care center at Konfanoche Teaching Hospital. Refurbishment of the operating theaters at Kolebu Teaching Hospital. We've almost completed a new, only the second military hospital. The first military hospital is 37 in Accra. The second military hospital is almost completed. It will be completed by first quarter of next year. And it's in the Ashanti region. The police hospital is being expanded, and the maritime hospital in Tema will be completed by the end of this year. Upgrading and expansion of the Greater Accra Regional Hospital, which was formerly called the Rich Hospital, is ongoing. Construction of a new regional hospital in Ashanti region is ongoing. Upper West Regional Hospital in Wa will be completed by the first quarter of 2017. And indeed, there are so many of them. 6 120-bed hospitals in Dodowa, Fomena, Abetifi, Garu, Timpani, Kumawu, and Sekendi. Upgrading of the Takrady Hospital, expansion of the Bolgatanga Hospital into a 386-bed facility. New hospitals coming up in Salaga, Tepa, Nsoko, Trifopraso, Konongo, Dumase. 100-bed new hospital coming up in Adenta. 5 new district hospitals approved for Somanya, Buipe, Sola, Tuna, Kalba, Tolong, and Hueta. It's not Hueta. And then 5 polyclinics in the Upper West region, Wichao, Babile, Lambuse, Ko, Han. 5 polyclinics in the Northern region, Pandai, Tatale, Janga, Cherponi, and Karga. 5 polyclinics in the Western region, Wasa, Dunkwa, Bogoso, Nswem, Mpoho, Elubo. 5 polyclinics in Bronga, Hafon, Krankwanta, Wemfie, Kwetre, Techimentia, and Boma. An additional 5 polyclinics in the Greater Accra region at Adenta, Ashaman, Botiano, Oduma, and Sege. The sword has been cut for these ones. They've just started. And then Central Region alone is receiving 10 new polyclinics. At Bisiasi, Goma, Daurampong, Bimpong, Akufunde, HC, Sunkwa, Asikuma, Jamina, Agona Duakwa, Brewa, Ekonfim Nakwa, Kifo Atimokwa, Gomwa Potsen. A new polyclinic to be built at Bamboy, and this is my constituency. In our next term, in office, we are building an additional 20 polyclinics in Ashanti region, in Volta, Eastern, and Upper East regions. And actually, there's so much. National health insurance. When the actuarial studies for the national health insurance were conducted, it indicated that based on the funding sources that had been identified, the national health insurance would last only a certain number of years. We have long since passed that period that was designated. It said that after that period, the national health insurance would collapse. It has not collapsed. It has even gone long beyond the period that was intended. And so, it means that we need to rework the sustainability of the national health insurance. And so we're going to look for new sources of funding for the national health insurance beyond the VAT. You know, we take 2.5% VAT, then we take workers' contributions, and then we also collect premiums. Those are the main sources of funding currently. And in the next 4 years, my proposal is that a percentage of the annual budget funding amount that comes from petroleum revenues should be assigned to national health insurance. This would prolong the life of the scheme, and it's not only just prolonging the life of the scheme, we're also making it more efficient. We're taking out the fraud, we're introducing more computerization, bringing in new claim centers and all that. And so it will make the scheme more efficient going into the future. We reduce annual aid deaths by 43%. We have reduced prevalence rates. We're providing prevention of mother-to-child transmission services to 81% of pregnant women. And in the next 4 years, we want to cover 100% of pregnant women with prevention of mother-to-child transmission. We reduced drastically the prevalence of HIV amongst exposed babies to 8%, down from 32%. That is significant. Our commitment in the next term will be to reduce malaria drastically. We also want to reduce cases of maternal and neonatal deaths by at least 50%. We want to increase supply and fair distribution of health personnel across the country. We'll complete all the ongoing regional hospitals. We'll undertake a comprehensive upgrade of the Tema General Hospital. The Tema General Hospital serves not only Tema but Ashaman, and it has a huge catchment area. And so we're going to upgrade it completely and make it into a modern hospital. So we'll continue all the other things. We'll continue the reconstruction. We'll complete the reconstruction of the 120-bed Bekwai Hospital. Parliament recently approved the funding for this particular project. We'll expand the bio-larvicidin spraying program to reduce the incidence of malaria in Ghana. We will promote medicinal plants, support the large-scale cultivation of medicinal plants, and we'll create a permanent body to review Ghana's herbal medicine regime, and will support the manufacture of traditional remedies for disease control. A lot of other things. When you get the detail, you can look at it. We would move the Accra Psychiatric Hospital. Mental health will receive priority from our next government. We shall prioritize mental health care and ensure strict implementation of the Mental Health Act 2012, Act 846. And one of the things we intend to do is to move the Accra Psychiatric Hospital from its current location to Pantang and develop the Pantang Mental Hospital into a first-class mental health facility. Within the next term of our administration, we will build 2 additional psychiatric hospitals, one in Ashanti and the other in the northern region. Currently, the only psychiatric hospitals we have are Accra Psychiatric Hospital, Pantang Hospital, and then Ankafo. And so we'll move Accra Psychiatric Hospital to join Pantang and develop it into a first-class facility. And then we'll build 2 more, one in Ashanti for the Middle Belt and another in the northern region for the Northern Belt. In the youth sector, the achievements are many. I'm not going to go through them, but some of the things we'll do in the next administration will be to expand the Youth Enterprise Support Program. For those of you who know the Youth Enterprise Support Program, we started it with 10 million Ghana cedis, and we disbursed it to young entrepreneurs to establish businesses and expand their businesses. What they did was they presented proposals, and they were helped to develop the proposals into business plans, and based on those business plans, they were given the capital to go into business. And many of them are doing very wonderfully. On Youth Day, I visited 2 of them, but there are many of them in different areas, in aquaculture, so many areas, and they're all doing quite well. And so under the next administration, we're going to expand that. We will increase the level of support under the Youth Enterprise Support Initiative to 25 million Ghana cedis a year. And so that will be 100 million Ghana cedis for 4 years. And that will go to young business people to help set up their own businesses and become employers rather than be employees. We will refurbish the Azuma Nelson Sports Complex in Accra to serve as a sports and recreational center for young people. Those of you who know it is the former Kaneshi Sports Complex. We're going to refurbish it into a new modern sports complex. We will build new sports stadia in the Upper West, Upper East, Volta, Eastern, and Brong-Ahafo regions. The remaining regions that do not have sports stadia will each receive Upper West, Upper East, Volta region, Eastern, and Brong-Ahafo region will be provided with new sports stadia. In every region, one of the new community day senior high schools, the 200 community day senior high schools, one of them in every region will be selected and will be fitted and developed into a center of excellence in sports. It will be a secondary school, but all the young people who show excellence in sports will be brought to that secondary school. And so there'll be 10 of them in each region. They'll compete in athletics and all the sports against each other, and we'll draw the young talent from there to feed the national teams. Ghana in West Africa was the first to achieve the targets of the Millennium Development Goals of cutting extreme poverty by half ahead of the 2015 deadline. The goal was that we should reduce by half extreme poverty by 2015. 2 years before 2015, that's in 2013, Ghana had achieved that goal. It was the first in West Africa. And we have finalized the social protection bill. We've increased the number of LEAP beneficiaries to almost 150,000. We've introduced the elderly persons welfare card called the EBAN card. And then there are many laws we've taken to Parliament: affirmative action bill, interstate succession bill, property rights of spouses bill, human trafficking legislative instrument, and so many others. Under the area of children, we've launched the Justice for Children policy, and so on and so forth. But under our next term in office, we're going to improve the quality of healthcare by continuing to register vulnerable people on the NHIs, including indigents. We will develop an enhanced national household registry that identifies the poorest households in our country so that we can reach them with support. We will pursue the passage of the Aged Bill and Social Protection Bill. We will continue the empowerment of head porters, they are popularly called Kayaye, by extending 1,000 pilot out-of-school Kayaye. Currently under the Youth Employment Program, we have a pilot scheme in which we are absorbing 1,000 out-of-school Kayaye into the youth employment program. And we're providing them with skills so that they can find work and come out of head portrait. And so under the next 4 years, we are looking to expand that from 1,000 to 10,000 of them. 10,000 of them will be registered under the youth employment, and they'll be given skills training so that they can go out into the world of work. We will introduce a special economic scheme for senior citizens, under which vulnerable senior citizens living in poverty above 65 years of age who do not have any formal pension. It means that they don't have any formal pension. They are vulnerable, living in poverty. These will be registered under the EBAN scheme, and they'll be granted a bi-monthly stipend by the state in order that they are able to survive. We will introduce a new motorized transport tricycle for physically challenged persons. This is a motorbike, but it's been adapted and has 3 wheels, and it is made specifically for physically challenged persons. We have received the prototype, and we'll give it to the National Federation of Disabled Persons for trial. And if it is found to be appropriate, we shall distribute them to disabled persons. An additional increase in the District Assembly's Common Fund reserved for persons with disability will increase there's a portion of the District Assembly's Common Fund. It's currently 3%. We're going to increase that percentage of the District Assembly's Common Fund to provide free NHIS subscription for disabled persons in the various districts, so that persons with disability, if they are sick, can be able to go to hospital because the subscriptions would have been paid for them. Plenty. With the economy, let me tackle the economy now. The economy faced serious challenges, and we have been successful in stabilizing the economy, especially the macroeconomic environment. GDP growth is expected to exceed 8% next year. The budget deficit is currently in single digits, and we're expecting that by the end of this year, budget deficit would have dropped to 4.9%. In 2013, we took it at almost 12%, and at the end of this year, we would have brought it down to 4.9%. Inflation is on a downward trend, and inflation has reduced significantly during the last month. We expect that it will continue to reduce, and our expectation is that by next year, we should go into single-digit inflation and be able to sustain it. If you take out the franc zone, that is the francophone countries, then the cedi is currently the most stable currency in West Africa. The cedi is very stable, and we will continue to ensure that it's stable. Our recent 750 million Eurobond came in at a rate of 9.25%, which is an improvement over the last Eurobond, and it was oversubscribed by $4 billion. We went onto the market for $750 million, and the international credit market offered us $4 billion. Now that is a sign of confidence in the economy, contrary to what somebody would want us to believe. But aside from that, I want to point out that with regards to economic management, it's not about how much you push up the GDP growth figures. It is about how you put in the structures to sustain those GDP figures. Because the history of Ghana's economy has been one of a yo-yo, going up and coming down, going up and coming down. So when we entered the extended credit facility of the IMF, I said this would be the last IMF program we enter into. It will be the last IMF program to end all IMF programs, because the IMF program, the extended credit facility program we're implementing, is based on our homegrown fiscal consolidation program. And in that fiscal consolidation program, we deliberately targeted institutional and structural reforms, because we identified the things that caused Ghana's economy to keep going up and down. And so with those structural reforms we've done, the economy is no longer bleeding because of BDC under recovery payments and foreign exchange loss payments. The economy is no longer bleeding as a result of unsustainable power tariffs. Currently, the wage bill is under control, and that is because before the budget, we agree with Labour what the base pay increase should be. And so before we pass the budget, wage and compensation is known and predictable. And so you don't have in the course of the year, like we used to do before, we will pass the budget, then after that we go into negotiations. And you go into negotiations, and the assumption you use in the budget, the negotiations end up much higher than that. And so already your budget is out of skelter. And so with the institutional and structural reforms that we have put into the economy, as GDP grows, it is sustainable than it was before. Some of the things we'll do working with the Bank of Ghana